We're stepping out of the lectionary today, out of the stories of Jesus' early life, to read from the book of Ruth. You'll understand why in a minute. Now, you might remember some parts of this story. I'm going to read from chapter 2, and I want to just give you this setup. There was a famine in the land of Judah, and so Naomi and her family left and went to the next door country of Moab. While there, Naomi's husband dies. Her sons marry Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. And then both of her sons also die. Now, widows have very few prospects, and so Naomi decides to return to Judah. Her daughter-in-law, Ruth, decides to go with her, even though she will be a foreigner and a widow in Judah. Now, today's passage starts just after Ruth and Naomi have returned. Now, Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone whose sight I might find favor." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, "To whom does this woman belong?" The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reaper.' So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting even for a moment." Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close, keep close. Your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow them. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessel and drink from what the young men have drawn." Then Ruth, she fell. She prostrated herself, and with her face to the ground said to him, "Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." And then she said, "May I continue to find favor in your sight, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants." May these words be to us our light and our life. Well, sometime last summer, a light switch broke in our kitchen. And it remained broken and not working for quite some time until about mid-November, when suddenly this project became so urgent. Not only did I work to fix the light, but mapped all the fuses in the fuse box at the same time. A couple weeks later, early December, Isa asked me, "Dad, what do you really want For Christmas, I was down in the basement working on something, and I just blurted out without thinking, what I really need is 2 hours of uninterrupted time in this basement to get it organized. Then the other day, I was looking for a spice jar in our very cluttered spice cupboard, and just got frustrated. I started pulling all the spice jars out, and I started lining them up on the counter, pulled out the tape measure to see how big a shelf would need to be to hold all of the spices so they would be easier to see. When the world around me gets chaotic, I get organized. I can easily retreat into my ever-growing list of house projects. And since November, I have noticed a distinct increase in the urgency of each and every one of those projects. But without my faith, I think there's a chance I might never leave my basement. Reading the story of Ruth calls us out from our safe spaces to risk something, to risk ourselves, to risk deeper relationships, and create safe space, not just for ourselves, but for others. Now, our tradition has long praised Ruth for her courage in choosing to cross the border from Moab into Judah with Naomi. Reading this story again today, I can't help but notice the parallels between it and the stories of the 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country. Now, as I said, as widows, Ruth and her sister-in-law Orpah had few prospects for survival in Moab. The death of their husbands meant also they lost their homes, their status, and their economic opportunity. Now, Naomi tries to convince them to stay in Moab because she knew that life as foreigners in Judah would not be much better. Deuteronomy is clear: no Moabite shall be admitted to the assembly of the Lord. And marrying a Moabite is condemned in the book of Nehemiah. At least in Moab, they were citizens. They belonged. They had families who might take them in. So Orpah decides to stay. But Ruth decides to take her chances and cross the border into Judah, even though she'll have no legal status and no prospects. Why would someone take such a risk? Jose was being extorted by gangs in his town in Guatemala. He writes, "While I was working at McDonald's, they would show up there and ask for money. They would also call my cell phone and home. There were times they actually came to my neighborhood. I paid them 3,000 quetzals once, which is about $400. I was a target because I was working and because my family lived in the United States. When they asked me to pay again, I refused. Then they threatened me. They told me they wanted the money, and if I didn't give it, they were going to kill me. So I talked with my family, and they immediately sent me here. This was the best option." Anna says, "I made the difficult decision to leave my country to escape the blows and humiliations I suffered at the hands of an alcoholic husband and the extreme poverty that my family lived in that took the life of one of my children. He died from severe malnutrition because we never had enough food at home." The promise of economic opportunity and the American dream draws many people to this country. But as undocumented immigrants, They face many obstacles, even if they survive the harrowing journey across the border. When Guadalupe came to the United States, she worked as a farm worker. She writes, "We picked celery and some Asian crops. We started working at 6 in the morning, and our workday was over 12 to 14 hours later. When I started the job, we were paid $5.25 per hour. By my third year, I was earning $6 per hour. The workers who had papers were getting paid $12 to $16 per hour. The working conditions were also bad. We were given only 30 minutes to eat lunch. We had to work under the heat and were not given water breaks. The grower watched us work with his binoculars from the top of a building. I put up with these conditions for my 5 children. I needed to send them money so that they could go to school." I picture Guadalupe when I read about Ruth begging for work in the barley fields. Notice how she experiences the same kind of exploitation. When asked about Ruth, the servant overseeing says, "She has been on her feet from early this morning until now without resting even for a moment." Underneath his praise is the belief that she is more valuable because of her backbreaking hard work and willingness to sacrifice her safety and comfort. There's no doubt the same thing, and probably much worse, are said of undocumented immigrants in this country. It is Ruth who is picking our food and washing our clothes and cleaning our houses, caring for our children and mowing our lawns. We are left wondering, where is the moral high ground on this issue? We call these people criminals, and yet is overlooking exploitation somehow less deplorable than someone illegally entering this country to find a job and to send money to their family? How can our faith help define what justice looks like and lead us to fix this broken system? In the story of Ruth, we see how justice begins with courageous relationships. It took relationships that crossed borders, defied the law, and offered refuge. Now, I'm sure Ruth was tempted to stay in Moab. It probably made the most sense. But it's not where she felt she belonged. It was not where she saw her future. The borders dissolve. In chapter 1, as Ruth speaks one of the most poetic and powerful declarations of solidarity in the Bible, she says this to Naomi: "Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." Despite their commitment to one another, their fate hangs in the balance when they return to Judah. Hearing that it is time to harvest the barley, Ruth starts working in Boaz's fields. As Boaz begins to notice Ruth, he learns of her relationship to Naomi. And it is that relationship that begins to change Boaz's view of Ruth as a foreigner. He finally says to her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Now, this is an important statement. Declaring her worthy of God's full blessing stands in defiant opposition to the law's exclusion of Moabites from God's assembly. But then Boaz takes it even further. He offers her security, making sure she continues to have a job in his fields. He offers her safety, telling the lascivious young men to stay away from her. And finally, later in the book, he risks condemnation from his community by marrying Ruth. We admire Ruth for her courage and her loyalty, but it is Boaz who should be our role model today. His faith in God's inclusive love calls him to offer refuge in very real, intangible ways for Ruth. The importance of this single act in terms of the Bible cannot be understated, as none other than King David can be found down the family tree from Ruth and Boaz. The future of Israel grows from the power of this relationship. I see today's sanctuary movement as a spiritual descendant of this relationship as well. Now, for decades, churches have opened their doors to undocumented immigrants to support their basic human rights and protest U.S. immigration policies. A sanctuary church will offer tangible support, housing, food, clothing, while a person legally fights their deportation order. This past November 15th, an undocumented Mexican and father of 3 appeared at a news conference at Arch Street United Methodist Church in Philadelphia. He sought sanctuary, quote, for the sake of his children, he said. In the last 7 years, more than 500,000 parents have been deported, leaving their citizen children in this country. There's no guarantee of stopping the deportation by taking someone in for sanctuary. But the church's support brings attention to the injustice of it and builds wider support for changing this broken system. So far, more than 30 churches in Minnesota have declared themselves to be sanctuary or sanctuary-supporting churches. And we have been invited to join them. Though people have been deported every day for years, and we must say it, 2 million people have been deported over the last 8 years while Obama was president, the most of any president. But this call is not just about the threat of our president-elect to immediately deport 2 to 3 million more. 2 anti-immigration bills have been introduced in the Minnesota legislature already this year. Now, to me, this decision is not merely about trying to stop one person's deportation. It's really about solidarity. It's about opening ourselves to a deeper relationship with immigrants in our community. It's about us as people of faith and conscience standing up and using our power and privilege together to change this system. It's about making God's inclusive love real and tangible, even if doing so puts us at odds with the law. For me, my faith calls me out of my basement, calls me out into deeper relationship. I think this is really not just about us offering sanctuary to someone facing deportation. It's about each one of us becoming a living sanctuary for anyone, for each other. Amen.